Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Vorkosagin saga, Cetaganda, chapters 11 and 12. In these chapters, Miles desperately tries to hold on to his fake mission. Fake as in not actually assigned to him, but very real in regard to the actual consequences that it could have on people around him. And, you know, he's actually managing this pretty well. I gotta give it to him. He always pulls it out. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very, very much to Erika for commissioning this episode. And apologies to everybody who was waiting. There was a mix-up with scheduling, I think. And thankfully, we all got here in the end. So that's good. Yeah, these are some, like, they're not, like, super eventful chapters. I mean, it's very difficult to compete with the last chapters where there was actually almost an explosion. So I'm not mad about it. It's not the sort of thing that you can really maintain. We can't have almost explosions every episode. That's just life. But I really did enjoy getting to see Miles once again find a way around being honest and subordinate. He just really doesn't know how to do it. And at this point, I think we can all agree it's almost its own talent. You know, the way he manages to constantly sidestep actually being like owing anybody anything. He manages to really get around it. And I, for one, wish I also had the same like skill in finesse regarding this, because when I do this, it just comes across as bitchy, and he manages to make it seem almost like I'm doing this for your own good. You shouldn't be involved. So let's start chapter 11. He is being called down to the IMSEC offices. And he's here to see Colonel Veridi, who, this man is no fool. And Miles is just like, I wish so very much that you were a fool. I get it. And the thing is, I don't think that's really what Miles wishes. I said this before. He often seems to think that dealing with somebody who is incompetent is going to be of help to him somehow, that it's going to make things easier, when I would argue usually the opposite is true. That actually it makes things more difficult and more frustrating in the end. So personally, I think that he underestimates the kind of difficulties that could be created for him with somebody who is actually incompetent, because he doesn't fully appreciate how much competence it takes to recognize that maybe I don't like what this kid is up to, but at least I can tell he seems to know what he is doing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be able to judge somebody else's abilities accurately, and that's part of competence. And I think a foolish person wouldn't recognize that Miles is maybe even better at his job than he is, and would get in his way. And I don't know, I think that having these people around him who actually know what's up is assisting, because they can tell, yeah, I mean, he's making some cogent arguments here. I can't exactly disagree with the assessment. You know what I'm saying? So this Veridi, this is delightful. The man himself was seated at a desk cleared in utilitarian bareness. Vorty was dressed as usual in the underlayers and robes of a middle-ranking gem lord of painfully sober preferences, subdued blues and grays. Except for the lack of face paint in a crowd of gem, Vority would practically disappear, though behind a Baryaran ImpSec console desk, the effect of the ensemble was a little startling. Yeah, I have a question for you. Do you guys think that it would, if we were to, let's say, get this series translated to the screen, if we were going to make a TV show, I have my suspicions, but do you think that they would just delete the whole face paint thing entirely from Cetaganda? Because I do. I just feel like it's the sort of thing that in when you're reading it, this is part of the culture and you fully accept that. But the people creating the show would not trust that the audience was like getting it and would think, oh, you know what, this is maybe a little silly. And they would wind up pulling back so much on it that it would make them almost indistinguishable from other characters. Like, for example, with A Song of Ice and Fire, only in this newest series, House of the Dragon, do they make the characters from Essos have like blue hair and like really give them the sort of over the top fashion looks. They didn't do that in the original series at all. And I really want this to be something like there may be a way to make it a little bit more subdued than it is really meant to be. Um, so that it works better on screen. That's a good point. Jeff is saying they always try to cut makeup costs, but also the makeup would keep folks from seeing their pretty faces. I'm not sure that's totally true. It might, but also the point of the Cetagandans is like how little they give away in their expression, so it might help with that. Also, you could keep the costs down quite a bit by just using stenciling. The way that these designs are described, I feel like it's uh, something that you could probably do quite easily, actually, as compared to the usual sculpting, mascara, all of that that you would need for like a regular makeup look. This might actually be faster, if anything. But anyway, I was just sort of wondering about it because every time that this is mentioned that there is face paint as like the part of the uniform, I keep getting brought up short because I'm just not picturing it by default in my head, and I have to rearrange the mental image I've got going on a lot to compensate for that. And I think it's partially because television wants to make everything seem a little bit more serious and grounded and gritty than it actually is. Um, so let's see. Yeah, Sylvan says, to be honest, a Hollywood adaptation would have to fight the execs even to make Miles short. That's true. There's a lot in the way that this would have to be created that I feel like goes against Hollywood standards. So that would be fascinating to see. It's so frustrating because like the very things that they would be fighting against would be the reason why anybody would want to see this on the screen. You know what I'm saying? It's so frustrating that like creators don't seem to really understand that, but we want something different, guys. Not everything has to look like Vikings or Game of Thrones. It's not, we don't have to have this like boring fucking standard actually. But it is sometimes like talking to a fucking wall when you anyway, I'm going off on this tangent. But so he is coming in here and like to boil down this conversation, Varady wants to just be like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? I know you're up to something. What is it? What is happening? You're being real sketchy. I can tell something is up. I smell it in the air. You're keeping me in the dark. I don't like it. And later on, this becomes even more exacerbated by the arrival of the investigator who Miles has to like. Miles shares a bunch of stuff with him in front of Voridi that Voridi had never heard before. And he does not appreciate finding all of this out for the first time in front of a Cetagandan. Like, that is super embarrassing. I get it. I'm not, like, I don't blame him for that reaction at all. Uh, it's a it's an unfortunate byproduct of working with Miles, I think, is just having to get used to looking like a fool because he has extremely low interest in working with anybody, any superior, really. So, um, you are an IMSEC officer by a courier officer by assignment, an interesting breed of men, utterly reliable and loyal. They go here, go there, deliver whatever is asked without question or comment or failure, short of intervention by death itself. It's not usually that dramatic. We spend a lot of time riding around in jump ships. One catches up on one's reading. Hmm. And to a man, these glorified mailmen report to Commodore Booth, head of IMSEC Communications Comar, with one exception. You are listed as reporting directly to Simon Ilion himself, who reports to Emperor Gregor. The only other person I know offhand in a chain of command that short is the Chief of Staff of the Imperial Service. It's an interesting anomaly. How do you explain it? Every once in a while, Emperor Gregor needs a personal errand run for himself or his household, which is too trivial or inappropriate to assign to working military personnel. Perhaps he wants, say, an ornamental breadfruit bush brought from the planet Pole to be planted in the garden of the imperial residence. They send me. That's a good explanation, Veridi agreed blandly. I love the way that Voridi keeps responding to him. He never says, that explains it. He just says, that's a good explanation. And I absolutely love him for that. This man isn't here to play. And he is going to be just as cagey with the language he uses as Miles is. And I'm here for it. So they continue this little sort of back and forth. Um, if you are a covert op agent here on a mission from God, you should have arrived with some sort of render all due assistance order. Then a poor IMSEC local man might know where he stood with you. Yes, sir. And so would anyone else who saw it. Does IMSEC Command suspect a leak in my communications? Not as far as I know, but as a lowly courier, I can't ask questions, can I? From the moment you set foot on Eta Ceta, Lord Vorkosigan, I have not noticed you stop asking questions. You got you there, buddy. You do. So, continuing to push the issue, Miles basically tells him all of this is nepotism. You know that I have this disability that like is embarrassing to Baryarans. You're from there, you get it. And it's a lot easier to send me off on these little tasks and get me out of sight. And that is the reason. Now, it's not really feeling like he's buying this at all. Again, he responds with very dot 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 convincing. Oh man. I both love how unconvinced he is, and I love how unconvincing his claim of being convinced is. All of it is very delightful. Um, and he says, "Is there anything else you'd like to tell me?" When I return to Barrayar, I will be giving a complete report of my excursion to Simon Ilian. I really have to assume he was not about to say my mission by mistake. He was about to say my mission and corrected himself as if he had a real mission and he almost like did a little slip up just to convince this man that this is like an official thing. But actually, this was completely like a purposeful slip of the tongue. It is definitely not within my authority to try to guess what he will wish to tell you. There. Whew, he told no lies at all, technically, even by implication. Yeah, be sure and point that out when they play a transcript of this conversation at your future court martial. I do really like that after everything that Miles has been through, he is starting to get very aware of like the legal wrangling that he is going to have to do with some of his storytelling, that I've got to be extremely careful on the way that I word this because God knows if I don't word it exactly right, we are going to have all kinds of things we can hang on this that are going to get me in big trouble. And just the sort of, you guys know that I kind of enjoy this quality of like an interaction where it's almost like dealing with Faye, where everything has to be so carefully constructed so as to be bulletproof and there so that there's not any chinks that you could wriggle through. And it's just fun when the way he's doing this is it's not even against the person he's speaking with, it's against a third party that he might have to deal with eventually. Um it's almost like he's sort of in a battle against himself in a way. Um so let's see. He says, you don't, this is Miles, you don't hire a genius to solve the most intractable imaginable problem and then hedge him around with a lot of rules, nor try to micromanage him from 2 weeks' distance. You turn him loose. If all you need is somebody to follow orders, you can hire an idiot. In fact, an idiot would be better suited. And do you consider yourself a genius, Lord Vorkosigan? He asked softly. Viridi's tone of voice made Miles' skin crawl. It reminded him so much of his father's when Count Vorkosigan was about to spring some major verbal trap. I wish we got to see a little bit more of him as an adult interacting with his father. I completely understand why that's not what we're getting, and I don't want the focus of these stories to change, not really. But for example, I would have loved, and I said this last time, in the previous book, if we had gotten to see the way that his father reacted to seeing Naismith, right? I was looking forward to it, and we just get like the talk of it. It would be just compelling, I think, to have a little bit more of a taste of that. Um, so when in response, he says, my intelligence evaluations are in my personnel file, sir. I've read it. That's why we are having this conversation. No rules at all? Well, one rule, maybe. Deliver success or pay with your ass. Your ass is still intact? Last time I checked, sir. This suggests astonishing authority and autonomy. No authority at all, just responsibility. Oh dear. You have my sympathies, Lord Vorkosigan. Thank you, sir. I need it. Do we know if Lord Yanaro survived the night? He disappeared, so we think he has. And Miles is like, well, why do you think just vanishing means that he's alive? Um, what about his stalker? Shortly after we left him, he was picked up by Cetagandan's civil police. who still have him in close custody. They received an anonymous tip. It seems the socially responsible thing to do, but I must say, the civils responded with admirable efficiency. He appears to be of interest to them for some previous work. I am really wondering if this previous work thing is going to be at all significant, helpful, whatever. It's just what I keep getting hung up on, you guys, is that this alleged professional got caught the way that he did. That's what keeps sort of tripping me up. I don't, it just feels to me kind of, I'm not really sure if sloppy is like too strong a word, but maybe it isn't that strong a word. It just feels to me like the fact that this guy got caught is almost part of the trick. And when I say the trick, I want to be really clear. I don't have any ideas. I don't really have a theory here. I am just in this place where it feels that even if, let's say, the whole blowing up the carpet thing went well, if this guy was caught and he was around, like, allegedly to take out, if he hadn't died in the explosion, Yanaro, doesn't that in itself point to something was being planned? Like, the whole point of setting things up, including setting up Yanaro, the way that he was, I thought, was so that we could have Yanaro be the fall guy for fucking up in a very foolish way that could be sort of hand waved as like, oh yeah, him and his fucking grandpa, the two of them are real fuck ups, you know? But if you have a man present who is like an assassin, how can you possibly explain away that this was an accident? And like, is it just feels so careless. And I really don't know whether this is an actual mistake or if this is part of like an overall other setup that I'm not seeing. But yeah, I don't know, you guys. It just something about the how easily they spotted him and zeroed in on him. I keep sort of wondering, is this a distraction or a decoy? Are they trying to pin this to somebody that is there more than one person involved who doesn't know that other folks are involved? That's another possibility that had occurred to me is like, what if there's more than one of these, like, ah, I keep wanting to say collaborators, but that implies they're working together, and that's not what I mean. But I just keep thinking about like, if you think that you're the smartest guy in the room and that you're managing to like pull this off and nobody else has a clue, but there's actually more than one of you that thinks that, you could accidentally be blowing up your spot by both of you doing too much and not really considering how it's going to blow back because you don't know that there's another person already out there like messing with things. Do you know what I mean? So this just kind of keeps like being, it doesn't fit to me. The point was to have Yanaro die in the explosion, and this guy was already here before the explosion didn't happen according to plan. They had spotted him present before Miles caught on to the fact that the carpet had been soaked. So the idea that like the guy who set this up realized it wasn't going to work and then tried to cover his tracks by killing Inaro, that doesn't really work unless he had somebody in place in case it didn't work. And he could have, I guess, but it all just feels a little bit too, I don't know, it doesn't quite hang it together for me. Um, so anyway, I he let's see, I'm trying to find the spot here. Did he have time to report into his employers before he was canned? No. So Lord X was in an information vacuum this morning. He wouldn't like that one bit. The misfire of yesterday's plot must make him frantically frustrated. And the conclusion that Miles comes to here is that this person, whoever it is that is behind this, that they are going to be so frustrated with how things didn't work out that they are going to make a mistake. That it's going to be he describes like a kid that tries to grow a garden and digs up the seeds to see how they are doing, which I'll be honest, I felt very offended by and called out because that is not unlike my own frame of mind sometimes when I am dealing with this sort of thing. Look, I'm new to gardening. I just want to see if anything is happening. No, I didn't actually do it, but I get it. But yeah, this feels like it could go either way. If they're making this kind of major mistake, either that's real bad news for you and you better watch out because they're going to take some sort of truly desperate action that is going to be unpleasant. Or it could be that they just like get more aggressive with their attempt, and it's not necessarily that they fuck up so much as they decide I don't care about collateral damage anymore. you know I'm just gonna fucking go for it, which, considering how they were willing to blow up this whole area, they didn't care about collateral damage a whole lot in the first place. So that's, I hope, not the direction we're going, because that feels pretty concerning. I guess we'll see. Um, so let's see. I'm trying to find the spot here. Okay, so Benin, Miles asks, like, when it's announced that Benin is here to talk to him, he's like, "Can I go get Ivan?" And he sort of wonders if Vari is going to stop him from getting Ivan because Miles feels like it's so obvious that he's up to no good that being allowed to collect Ivan on his own is the equivalent of like letting two suspects have time alone to get their story straight before they talk to the cops. I can't tell if Voriti just doesn't consider Ivan a factor here, and it's just kind of like an overall insult to the fact that Ivan is not seen as a threat by anybody, or if it's supposed to be that he is just playing into, all right, fine, I'll let you have your own way. Let's see what happens when you get exactly what you asked for, which is no rules, and I will take a step back and um but part of me really does feel like it's commentary on Ivan, and I feel bad. I don't think this is an incorrect assessment, but also I like Ivan has had some decent thoughts, and he has one here, in the upcoming section where he's like, "What if we just took away the gene bank thing, and then they didn't even have something to open with their fucking key? How about that? I bet they wouldn't like that." And Miles is like, "Oh my god, that's brilliant!" And he says, "Why didn't I think of that?" And Ivan, in a moment of real fucking insight, in my opinion, is like, well, clearly you didn't think of it because then you couldn't play hero in front of your fucking Hope woman. And Miles is very offended, but that dude was exactly on the money. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, Ivan isn't as much of a dodo bird. It's just that he has simple desires. He's a guy who doesn't ask a lot from the world. He just wants a few things in particular, and I think that's admirable, if anything. But yeah, I'm not trying to say that Ivan deserves more respect than he gets. I feel like that's too strong. But I do think that the way people see him is even more clownish than he really has seemed to be. Um, so let's see. Uh, I got Veridi under control temporarily. I think he thinks I'm on a mission from Simon Ilian. That means you aren't. I knew it. Ivan groaned, pulled a pillow over his face, and squashed it tight. I am now, or I would be if Ilian knew what I know. Um, and uh, let's see. This never volunteer. That's the ticket. You're catching on at last, cause shut up, get up. This is important, but you have to stay absolutely cool. I may be completely off base and panicking prematurely. I don't think so. I think you're panicking postmaturely. In fact, if you were panicking any later, it would be practically posthumously. I've been panicking for days. So then we get this other moment from Ivan. Now, this is clearly a thing that we're going to do. And I just want to register my complete and total approval because what we're getting is a bunch of little vignettes of what it was like growing up with Miles as your friend and how much this kid just could ruin your life because he was a fucking mischief maker. And it's the sort of like kind of gimmick I feel like that could be done really poorly, but because so much else of this is so well written, it doesn't feel like that sort of cheesy at all. Do you remember, Ivan sighed, that time in the back garden at Vorkosigan House when you'd been reading all those military histories about the Cetagandan prison camps during the invasion, and you decided we had to dig an escape tunnel? Except it was you who did all the designing, and me and Elena who did all the digging. We were about 8, said Miles defensively. The medics were still working on my bones. I was still pretty fragile then. And the tunnel collapsed on me, Ivan went on dreamily. And I was under there for hours. It wasn't hours, it was minutes. Sergeant Bothari had you out of there in practically no time. It seemed like hours to me. I can still taste the dirt. It got stuffed up my nose, too. Mother would still be having a fit if Aunt Cordelia hadn't sat on her. We were stupid little kids. What has this got to do with anything? Nothing, I suppose. I just woke up thinking about it this morning. I never believed I'd miss Sergeant Bothari, but I think I do now. Who's going to dig me out this time? And Miles really has a moment of like, fucking true. Um, but yeah, I like too that the last time they had this little like, remember when we were such and such age? Miles in that was, I think, 10. So we just had this bit where we've gotten a little bit younger with this story. And I think that maybe the theme that we keep getting like younger and younger as we continue on. And that way it starts to get like a little bit more ridiculous every time, you know? I'm into it. I like this. I'm looking forward to more. So they go down there and meet with Benin, and I love this. Benin comes in real hot with his uh the dead Ba. That wasn't the first time you saw Ba Lura, was it? And he's like really doing this sort of like ha, thinking he got him. And Miles just has come to the conclusion that he is going to cop to absolutely everything. So he just replies with correct, which pretty much wrong foots Benin out of the gate. This is the best way. If you can ever make it so that somebody who is coming at you hard is taken off guard by the fact that you simply are not reacting the way they expected you to react, that's ideal. So I really loved this approach. At the same time, though, I feel so fucking bad for Benin because he's just trying to do his goddamn job. And this kid is out here just tripping him up. What he finally is just like, oh my God, dude, if you knew that I was going to find out about this, why didn't you just tell me in the first place? And Miles says it was an interesting test of your competence, which everybody, I would just love if you would step back and imagine a kid that's probably half your age telling you they were testing your competence. And for that kid to be good enough that they actually, it's ringing true. This is not sounding to you like some bullshit. This is sounding very much like, oh my God, he means it. And he's very smart. And he couldn't tell if I was as smart as him. This man must be so fucking tired. I swear to God, I feel for him so much. Benin, this isn't fair. Really, like, all in all, Benin is actually really lucky because he is getting assisted by somebody who has such vested interest and is so intelligent that I think if anyone else had been, I think if he didn't have Miles's help, the whole way that this was set up, as Miles has pointed out, was going to be that he was a sacrificial lamb, and I think he would have been screwed. I think that would be the plan. So he's actually, I think, lucking out with having Miles in his corner. But I am certain at this moment it does not feel that way. So I just I just kind of feel for this guy. Um so Miles finally just like pours out the whole story, except he doesn't mention anything about the key or the Hope lady or any of that. Unfortunately, he does mention something about the Hope ladies being distressed at the death of her ba later, and that opens the question of like, well, how did you meet her? What all is going on there? And he wasn't even supposed to allude to that, so he almost fucked up and has given an indication there's something else going on for sure. Um, so and Benin, like, we find out that he does have a record of the ba going to another ship before going to Miles, but he actually doesn't have any info on whose ship it was, and he seems really distressed by that. Because when Miles asks, can you elaborate and tell me whose ship, he says no, and Miles quickly is like, I'm sorry, let me clarify. Could you be more specific if you chose to? And I think that he was wanting to really give the impression I'm keeping information to myself. So when Miles presses him and he has to admit, no, I don't even have the information if I choose to, he's like bummed about having to admit that. There's just a lot, but he's just bummed, man, you know? Um, so let's see. I'm trying to find the spot where Miles like creates his little he has the nerve disruptor, which he's like, you might be able to trace this to something, you know, and that could be helpful. Um and I'm trying to find the spot where he says this thing. Uh I'm sorry guys. I should have highlighted this. But he comes up with like a way of framing what happened to them to make it seem like if I were to report this, this might have screwed up like diplomatic relations between us for a little while. And I didn't think that that was the way to handle it. And here it is. My government considered this solemn occasion an important opportunity to send a message that we would be glad to see more normal trade and other relations, and an easing of tensions along our mutual borders. I did not judge that it would do anything helpful for our mutual tensions to open our visit with charges of an unmotivated armed attack by an imperial slave upon the Barrieran special representatives. The implied threat was obvious enough. Despite Bennon's face paint, Miles could tell that one had hit home. Even Viridian looked as if he might be giving the pitch serious consideration. And I really enjoy this because that just implies that Viridi is not really like buying most of what Miles is saying. So if anything is like getting past his barrier of like, this is bullshit, it's got to be a pretty convincing and solid argument. Good for you, Miles. Look at you just pulling this out. Um, so yeah, he hands over the nerve disruptor, finds out that they don't know where the bot, like whose ship he went to first. Um, and what did you and Hope Ryan really discuss? For that, I'm afraid you will have to apply to the Hope Ryan. She is Cetaganda to the bone, and so all your department. But I think her distress at the death of the Balur was quite genuine. Bennin's eyes flicked up. When did you see enough of her to gauge the depth of her distress? Distress? Or so I deduced. So yeah, the fact that she was like out of her bubble to talk to him, he's just like, hold on. So he asks, as Benin is about to leave, Miles is like, hey, so you know when I told you that you might want to try and get around anybody who was going to throw some uh obstacles in your way by appealing directly to the Emperor first? Did you do that? And Benin actually kind of like opens up here a little bit and turns and looks at him and is like, yeah, I did. And Miles is like, so how'd it go? And he's like, you know, surprisingly well, actually. He seems truly kind of like, I didn't think that would work. And maybe I even felt a little bit like, uh, eh, what's the word? Impudent doing it. And it wasn't taken that way at all, which took me off guard, you know? Um, so he leaves, and this is when Virides says, I am not a mushroom to be kept in the dark and fed on horse shit. Right. Miles sighed inwardly. Sir, apply to my commander. Be cleared and I'm yours. Until then, my best judgment is to continue exactly as I have been. The transmission, I think they have said already that it's like 2 weeks delay. So that's one of the fun things about the way that this universe is set up, is that communication is not instantaneous. So there are all kinds of perfectly good sounding reasons why Miles wouldn't be able to be stopped by anybody before he starts doing some truly wild shit. And like I said, legitimate sounding reasons. I'm not trying to say they are. I'm just explaining. I feel like it would be very easy if I were writing a sci-fi story. I think that I might fall into the, I'm just going to have it be instant because magical technology, you know? But really, if you want a lot of stories like this to work, you kind of have to put in some sort of obstacle of that type. And it's a really smart way because, of the sheer distance. The tech in this story, like, things are very advanced, but not, they can only go so far when it comes to things that are truly as insurmountable as sheer distance. And I think that's very reasonable. It's believable. And it's the sort of like, in a horror movie when everybody's cell phones don't work for whatever reason. You have to find a way for people to not be able to like call for help. That's one of the foundational things. And it's just the way that you make that work that is key. So I just really, these stories are just so well constructed and I enjoy it a lot. Um, so I have to reach Ryan somehow, Miles said at last. I can't afford to wait. Things are getting too damn tight. I don't want anything more to do with any of this, said Ivan distantly. It's too late. Yes, I know. Huh, here's a wrinkle. This invitation has both our names on it. It's not a name I recognize. And it is a garden party with one of the more elderly of the Holt ladies, which winds up being, it's unclear to me whether she invited him expressly because he was going to be part of this meeting and she was facilitating that, or if maybe Hope Ryan is like friendly with her and suggested that she do this, and she has enough sway that this lady was like, all right, fine, invite him, I guess. I'm just I don't know how much she's in on the whole thing, if she's part. I feel like she must be part of the whole Star Crush thing, but I don't know. Um so let's see. Oh my God, I forgot about this conversation because Ivan is like wanting to obviously hook up with another hot gem lady, and Miles suggests that maybe they'll like keep some of Ivan's cells and rebuild his parts. And Ivan has to be like, it's not just about the parts. There's more to it than that. And I was just like, Ivan, doing a whole, it's the way you use it. Um, so then we go to chapter 12, the garden party. And it's just this incredibly over the top setting. Uh Dusk here in the center of the capital was a silver sheen in the atmosphere, for the half-kilometer high building overlooked the green rings of parkway surrounding the celestial garden itself. Curving banks of flowers and dwarf trees, fountains, rivulets, walkways, and arched jade bridges turned the roof into a descending labyrinth in the finest Cetagandan style. Every turn of the walkways revealed and framed a different view of the city, stretching to the horizon, though the best views were the ones that looked to the Emperor's shimmering great phoenix egg in the city's heart. This just sounds so cool looking. I just can't help but think that they would do all of this with CGI. And I want this to be practical effects. I want them to like build a garden. Um, so Lady Dar is greeting them, and it says apparently being inside her home counted the same as being inside a bubble, for she was welcoming her guests. And that answered my question, because I had mentioned before that I was comparing a lot of this to um, various modesty clothing that is not worn inside the home. So same rules apply here. Uh, Glen Admiral or Gem Admiral, I called him Glen. Gem Admiral Har commanded half the Cetagandan fleet, and his duty delayed arrival for the final ceremonies of the Empress' funeral was the reason for tonight's welcome home party. And we have a similar thing here with the first introduction to Metsov, where he is wearing only one or two strategically chosen metals so that they stand out really obviously, instead of wearing everything at once, which some might do, in the mistaken impression that it made them more imposing. And I just thought it was sort of interesting that he's got a different approach, and or that no, not like that he has the same approach as Metsov, but it is implied that they both have different approaches than the average person might have. Um, just, I think pointing to the understanding of subtlety for both of them. Um, so there's also the fact that like this woman is clearly a reward to him, and it says Lord Har would have pinned her to his tunic too, if he could, Miles felt, for all he had won her some 40 years past. The Har Gem clan's face paint featured mainly orange and green. The patterns lacked definition, crossing with the man's deeply age-lined features, and clashing horribly with the red of the uniform. I don't like that, guys. I understand that all the paints mean something, and that's fine. But I really am sad that they don't make more of an effort to ensure things go together, because I just expect these folks to have more everything is so often all about the aesthetic, and I I don't know. I just expected better. I want things. They put so much effort into everything that I just felt like, why not? Why wouldn't you ensure that as well? Um. So let's see. Oh yeah. The, they all talk about for a minute how everybody here is super old in comparison to the usual parties and that their arrival has really not brought down the average significantly at all. And Miles is considering the distribution of power in this society and how a week ago he would have said, of course, it's the Gem Lords. You know, they're the ones that control weapons, and so they have the real power. And how he is beginning to grow up a little bit and realize it's not that simple. And that the last thing he would have said would have been Gem women. But now he's starting to be like, well, maybe, you know. Um, the Barryaran party collected drinks and began a slow circuit of the rooftop garden's walks. Um, they rounded some greenery to see a woman in Hope white, but with no Hope bubble, standing alone and staring out over the city. Miles recognized her from the heavy chocolate dark braid falling down her back to her ankles, even at this three-quarters turn of view. The Haute Vio de Chilean. And then this moment, this is so weird. Um, she turns to look at them. Is this the one who does this? Let's see. Yeah, here it is. For just a second, her astonishing cinnamon eyes seemed copper metallic with a rage so boundless Miles' stomach lurched. Then her expression snapped into a smooth hauteur, as blank as the bubble she lacked, and as armored. The open emotion was gone so fast, Miles was not sure the other two men had even seen it. But the look was not for them. It had been on her face even as she'd turned, before she could have identified the Barryarans, blackly dressed in the shadows. What is up with this? Like, she's with her husband? Is she feeling a way about him? Is she aware that he's up to something? Like, where is this coming from? This compelled me a lot. I'm just so interested. It's not just the fact that like the anger itself is meaningful to the plot. It's honestly just as much the fact that these women are so cautious about showing emotion in general that for one to slip like that at all is so rare. I am just instantly sort of like, ooh, bestie, tell me what's happening. You know, like it's, anytime that you have a character that is usually really deeply controlled and they slip for a minute, I get very, very interested. Um, so Ivan, it turns out, and I hadn't even thought of this is the first time that he is seeing a Hote lady. So your boy, he tries, you know, he do. And I understand. However, it's just very awkward to watch. Miles is sort of like, oh God, is this what I'm like? And he comes to the conclusion, like, yeah, I think I am. Oh, that sucks. That's so embarrassing for me. There is nothing like the moment that you like see somebody else behaving in a way that is familiar and you realize, like, oh, that's me. That's what I'm like. Because there's nothing is ever quite as embarrassing as behavior that you are guilty of. That's like where that embarrassment comes from, is the familiarity of it. Like remembering viscerally times where you have done the same thing. So, oh, agony. Agony, you guys. I fucking hated this. And it doesn't even last that long, but it's really awful to watch. So, Ivan, eventually, she just sort of brushes him off. Ivan sees her husband. The husband really behaves in a way here. Chilean's gaze swept the Barryarans, his nostrils flaring in suspicion. Hot Vio, come with me, please. Yes, my lord, she said, her lashes sweeping down demurely, and she escaped around Ivan with a bare nod of farewell. Chilean brought himself to nod also, acknowledging the Outlander's existence with an effort, Miles felt. I. What was he concerned about? Is it just the fact that they are Outlanders, period, and that she is near them is like kind of she's, like you're better than that. You don't need to be talking to these guys. Is that really all it is? Because I mean, I'm not I don't have a problem with that as being, but it just made me suspicious of him, and I don't know if I'm meant to be in that way. It's guys, it's hard to tell. Like you know how this is, and this is the point of a mystery, right? Is that you are meant to have all kinds of little red herrings and uh false leads that you follow, but my mind can get so overwrought and just straight up paranoid, really, I guess, that I feel a little bit foolish sometimes when I'm like live and I'm suddenly going, wait, should I be worried about this guy? You guys remember how, like, a few books ago, I was concerned that maybe there was something going on with Ivan, not Ivan, Ilian. And I was thinking that he was a traitor. And I don't know. I really thought so. Things just like some things just felt like they didn't quite jive for me. And since then, I can't help but giggle at that because it doesn't feel likely at all anymore. But at the time, it was just me starting to get a little bit fevered in my mind. So this is when Miles gets summoned to speak privately, and Vorobyev wants to like give him a guard, a comm link, anything, but he disdains all of it. So it turns out the meeting he is being brought to is a bunch of the Hote ladies with Degtiar. And he is brought by let's see, I'm trying to find the spot here. What is her name? I'm trying to see if she gives her name eventually when she arrives at the property, because he asks like, how why aren't they stopping you, and she says something like, I live here, what do you mean why don't they stop me? um but oh, here it is. I'm the Haute Pel Navar, consort of Etasita. I live here. And he registers how odd it is that like that makes it sound like she's consort to her whole planet. And I don't know if any of you are listening to the coverage for Raybearer that Rashawn and I have been doing. The books are so much fun. And in this recent book, there is a what's the word I want? Like a tradition by which women can become brides of a whole village if they don't have anywhere to go and they don't have like a safety net. They can do that to have a safety somewhere to. It's basically like claiming sanctuary at a church or something. And it sort of made me think of that, except this is such an elevated position as opposed to what you would be doing in the other situation, which is that you are so debased and have no choices that you would be doing that. Um, this woman has that bubble and she carries Miles on it. And it's kind of fun because, like, he had been wondering whether or not these chairs had the capability to carry a whole other person. So that's answering that question. And then she goes over the side of the building and carries him down in that. And he's like, whoa. And he almost screams and he has to just keep it together. And it's like, I thought that these didn't go that high. And she says, well, if you start with enough of elevation, you can just maintain a glide downward, which that is useful to know as well. That means that people who, like, if somebody is in possession of one of these bubbles, they could potentially get away in a lot of different, by a lot of different means, if height is no factor for them. And I love how she's sort of exhilarated by doing this because she hasn't done it in like 25 years, something like that. So they the meeting here, Miles is a little bit like put out at the fact that Degtiar has told all of these women without conferring with him regarding how much to share. But there is a part of him that's sort of like, how is she supposed to get a hold of me and tell me this anyway? Like he acknowledges that he is being maybe a little bit unreasonable. And also she is wanting him to share all of the information that he has. And he is a little bit gun shy about this because, to his mind, well, one of these people could be in on it. Like, why do you think I should just spill all of this in front of them? They could just take it straight to their husband. And I like that her reaction is to immediately sort of put a calming hand out because she knows that everybody is going to be offended and just be like, he doesn't know. He can't be expected to understand. Just like before we even get started, everybody calm down, you know? Um, and, uh, she says, I would like for you to repeat to the consorts how you came into possession. So he gives the info, and I'm trying to find this spot where like they have another or sort of break in the conversation. Uh let's see. We have concluded even with the bank and key in his hands, the satrap governor could not run the hot genome by himself. The hot of his satrap would not cooperate with such a sudden usurpation. He must plan to appoint a new consort. We think she has already been selected. Do you know who? Not yet. She is someone, I fear, who does not wholly understand the goal of a hot. It is all of a piece. If we knew which governor, we could guess which hot woman he had suborned. If we knew which woman, well. So that's interesting. He brings up their hope bubbles as well and asks to understand how they are keyed because he's trying to figure out like how somebody could potentially break through the security on these things and use it, and how, like, whether this is possible to have the assumption at this point is very much this is how they carried the ba into the murder scene. And she says they are keyed genetically. You leave skin cells when you pass your hand across the pad, and these are sucked in and scanned. It runs through a tree of a dozen or so critical markers. How much chance is there of duplicating the markers in two or more individuals? Just a dozen factors to fool the machine. Vanishingly small, even among closely related members of one's own constellation. She hesitated, exchanging a glance with Lady Pell, who raised her brows thoughtfully. There's a reason I ask. When Gem Colonel Bennon interviewed me, he let slip that 6 hope bubbles had entered the funeral rotunda. He didn't tell me which 6, but I bet you could get him to disgorge the list. Suppose you ran the markers of those through your records and checked for accidental duplicates among living Hope women. If the woman is serving the satrap governor, she may have served him in that murder, too. Your reasoning is correct. We could do that if we had the great key. Oh, yeah, that. Oh, Miles. Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. Oh, you guys, he is so fucking deflated. That killed me. Oh, it really did. He just was on a fucking roll. He was feeling himself. And this was all, it's a good idea. But God, the way that he just gets like fucking slapped down. So embarrassing. Um, so let's see. My strategic analysis so far suggests either Prince Slike or Hope Ilsum Ketty. Um, Recent events point to Ketty. Is there anything any of the consorts have seen or heard that would help pin him more certainly? And Rian is like, no, unfortunately not. So, um, let's see, Rian seemed less and less like a damsel in distress all the time. In fact, he was beginning to wonder if he was trying to rescue the dragon. And that had occurred to me at one point. I really started off this like feeling away about how much he crushed on her instantly and being like, dude, she doesn't seem like she is your match at all. And I was very dismissive of her overall, not necessarily intelligence, but like her slyness, I guess, and the kind of like canny way that his mind works. And then I started to wonder, is that the whole thing? Am I meant to be thrown off by that with her and simply have missed it? But it's unclear. I don't really think at this point that I'm actually suspicious of her, but it did sort of cross my mind and I just kind of dismissed it. There's not anything to go on to believe that she would be behind this. um so Miles says, finally, I suggest recalling all duplicate gene banks from the satrap governors. If they are returned, you will have stripped him of his ability to carry out his larger plan. If he resists releasing it, you will have smoked him out. And Pell is saying, oh my God, get them back? Do you know how much trouble it was to get them up there? He might take both bank and key and flee. No, that's the one thing he can't do. There are too many imperially guarded wormhole jumps. Speaking militarily, open flight is impossible. He'd never make it. Um, so once you have the bank back, you may be able to negotiate the key's return in exchange for, say, amnesty. Or you can claim he stole it, which is true, and set your security to get it back. He may threaten to destroy it. You must know Ilsum Ketty better than anyone else here, Hot Nadina, said Miles. Now, you guys, Hot Nadina has silver hair. And there is this moment, and I know that this is silly, but I'm gonna bring it up as soon as I get there. I'm gonna keep an eye out for this line because I think you'll get what I'm saying here. Um, he is an erratic young man. I am not convinced he's guilty, but I know nothing about him that makes your accusation impossible. uh you can recreate the key eventually, can't you? And they all groan at the overall time that it would take, but Miles can't help being a little smug because he knows that Barrier really would not want this key made anyway. So if this doesn't work out, it might actually be for the best. So then here it goes. Here's the line. The consort of Sigmacida, the silver-haired Nadina, sighed. And you guys, the whole way that line rhymed, if I wasn't thinking funky cold Medina, I know it's Medina, but it just in my head, and then that was like in my head for an hour afterwards. Silver haired Nadina. Um, so this Nadina is like the celestial lady being worried about stagnation. Like, she was right. In my lifetime, I've seen the way that we have started to sort of slow down. And there's a moment where Degtiar apologizes for her failure. And Nadina says, you did your best, but you shouldn't have attempted to handle it alone. It was my charge. A little less emphasis on the my, and a little more emphasis on the charge next time. Miles tried not to squirm at the general applicability of this gentle correction. Ah, yes. At least Miles has that self-awareness. Um, so they all agree to attempt to get back the gene banks. And they're going to return them to the Star Crush and pretend that they are like experimental samples. Um, and let's see, Rian tells him that she'll contact him again. Uh, and he's watching her and thinking, like, I'm glad that she didn't at least even pretend to be at all interested, because it's easier for me to restrain myself now. But if she had, she would have fucking had me by the throat. Like, there's, I'm still very much on the edge. And I can't help but wonder if I offered to go as a boss servitor in disguise because I was kind of subconsciously aware that's how she already saw me. Um, so he gets carried back to the Celestial Garden on the bubble. Um, he mentions about the Hope ladies and whether or not they were involved in the plant and animal life in the garden. And she's like, oh, God, no, we don't work with plants and animals. We only do human stuff. The Gem are the ones that do like that lowly, you know? She's not that snotty about it, but like that's definitely the energy. And our highest honor is for a favorable gene complex we have developed to be taken up into the hot genome itself. So he gets let out. Vorobyev finds him and is agitated. Uh, and Miles is like, everything is fine and we can go. Vorobyev said nothing. Miles rose, wondering how soon the ambassador and Veridi were going to stop taking "not yet" for an answer. Not yet, please. Not yet. And that is the end of the chapter. So I am over time. I have to go, as usual. But I really appreciate all of you bearing with me with the scheduling screw up. Sorry about that. I'm sure it was my problem. And appreciate your patience on that. And thank you very much to Erika for commissioning this one. Hope you all are enjoying the coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.